Over here, up there, I saw a UFO.
It was a huge event in his life. He told his friends. He had the sighting, and he called in to the New York Daily News and the NYPD. He released a sketch that he'd made immediately after the event. He granted interviews to reporters.
And it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river. It wasn't a helicopter, it wasn't a balloon, and it was so near.
And it looked what, sort of round, white, luminescent, and silent?
Silent, and it looked dark, like black or gray in the middle, and had white lights, just looked like light bulbs, you know? Just going off, on, blink, 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 round the bottom, and on top was a red light.
He put his claim in the liner notes of his upcoming Walls and Bridges album. He wasn't shy. And shortly before his death in 1980, he recorded a song with a lyric that said there were UFOs over New York. And it wasn't even the first UFO song that he had recorded. He had done one years earlier. So that's what I want to do today. I want to talk about the sighting with you folks, because sadly, John Lennon is not here to tell the story himself. The truth is that people tend to dismiss his sighting because there are so many other great cases. And the obvious problem, hey, it's a John Lennon UFO story, right? I'm here to tell you that such an easy and casual dismissal aimed at getting a laugh is a mistake, particularly in this day and age when the US government actually admits to the reality of unidentified aerial phenomena. That puts a lot of things back on the table, including the Lennon sighting. Okay, then, let's wind the clock back to August of 1974. It's August 23rd. The sighting took place that night, and that was exactly 2 weeks to the day since Richard Nixon had resigned his presidency in disgrace. Back then, newly sworn-in President Gerald Ford was still learning how to make toast in the family quarters of the White House, and that was big news. So in this brief window of time, there was hope in America again. The stranglehold that Richard Nixon had on our national psyche had been broken. The system actually did look like it had worked and let us throw the bum out, and even Vietnam was winding down. But all was not well in Lennon's world when this happened. The US government was trying to throw him out of the country, and his immigration case consumed much of his time. And he'd been broken up for over a year at this point with Yoko Ono. He'd moved to Los Angeles with their assistant, a young woman named May Pang. She was just 22. And it was his so-called lost weekend, fueled by drugs and alcohol. And he ended up in the news looking like a celebrity who had lost control. And May Pang became an eyewitness to a series of embarrassing and spirit-crushing public run-ins about town. That was why he was back in New York City. In those last days of August, in the summer of 1974, John Lennon and May Pang were only in their second month of living at their penthouse apartment. And the address was 434 East 52nd Street in New York. It was a great apartment, had a view of Brooklyn's Navy shipyard docks. Lennon told friends that whenever he looked out, it reminded him of working-class Liverpool, where he grew up with the other Beatles. I mean, it was a very cool place. I think it sold recently for over $5 million. It had a wraparound outside patio with a view of the East River, and as it turned out, something else that wasn't supposed to be there at all. So that's the setup to this. Let me tell you what happened. It's around 9 o'clock at night. John Lennon is sitting in his bedroom. He's on the bed, and he is looking over the Walls and Bridges album artwork to see, whether he approved of it or not. He's naked, okay? That's part of the story you can't get away from. May Pang has called in pizza. She's in the house. She's naked. All right. Lennon, while he's working on this thing, looks outside the window and sees something that he can't explain. So he runs out onto the patio and he sees something that he describes later as about the size of a Learjet. And it's so close that in various tellings, he said you could throw a brick at it and hit it. So he starts screaming, May, you got to come out here. You got to come out here. And she's not coming. And he starts screaming, you got to come out here now. So she comes out And now you've got two naked people in New York City standing on their penthouse, and they're looking at something in the sky that is hovering, and it's completely silent. And this is what it looks like. It looks like a cone, and it's got a red bright light on the top. And on the bottom, it has a series of what Lennon would describe as light bulbs that were alternating around the bottom of it. Blink on, blink off, blink on, blink off. And they take a good, hard look at this thing. And according to both of them, it was there at least 10 minutes. And in the middle of it, it does something that very few people were making up at that time. Very few people had reported this kind of behavior at the time. It goes sideways, which blew May Pang away. She was like, what is it doing? It went like this, and then suddenly it was sideways. And it begins to move slowly down the East River as Lennon and May Pang watch this thing. And it goes down the river. It's going slowly. It's silent. A lot of the windows in the area are closed because people are gone for the summer. It was that's the kind of neighborhood it was. And it goes down past the United Nations building. And as they're watching it, it then goes up in the sky and it's gone. But it's an extended sighting. And the idea that it had these lights and they were twinkling and there were different colors is not something that would even be in Close Encounters until 1977 when Spielberg made it. So what does he do? He immediately goes to work trying to make his recollection clear. He makes he was famous for sketches, and he makes several sketches of this UFO. And he also calls his friend Bob Gruen, who was the photographer who would end up taking that famous photo of John Lennon with the ripped t-shirt that says New York City. And he tells him to come over because May has taken photos. Bob takes the camera back, he takes the film out, he develops the photos, and the photos don't show anything. They're blank. They look like it's been through the detector at the airport, little sprocket holes, and that's about it, blasted out. They call the police. Lennon doesn't call the police because he's afraid if he says that I'm John Lennon and I saw a UFO, nobody's going to really care. So he has Gruen call the police. Gruen calls the police, the NYPD Blue people. They say they've got several reports of it that night. He also calls the New York Daily News. They say they've seen about 5 other reports on that. May Pang would later say in an interview that there were 400 other people who saw it. Now, I don't know about all that. I don't know because I haven't been able to find any more of these witnesses. I do know that in 1983, when I was working in Los Angeles for KABC, I met May Pang. She told me this story herself. She wrote about it in her book, Loving John. And it's always stayed with me as a phenomenal story for a couple of reasons. First, this is the man that wrote the famous song, Give Me Some Truth. He was a man that told things the way he saw them. I don't think anybody can doubt that. So here's a guy that wants the truth, and he immediately tells this crazy story about seeing a UFO. And he tells it at a time when it would be a problem for him. I mean, he's got this immigration case going on. The last thing he needs is for people to think that he's busy seeing UFOs while he's naked. That's not a good look for him. But he tells the story anyway, and he sticks with it all his life. It's corroborated by May Pang, who seems like a very credible witness if you hear her talk about it.
Dark, 9:30 at night, looking at this thing with no noise, nothing. So he took the first thing, which was obviously a manila envelope, and drew it just so he wouldn't forget what it looked like. And it was a bright red light with white light going around. It's metal, that metal, hot look.
And not only that, 4 months before he passed away, because he was murdered in New York City on December 8th of 1980, he records a song called Nobody Told Me. And that song includes the phrase, there's UFOs over New York, and I ain't too surprised. And he includes it on that famous album artwork. He puts it out there, he sticks with the story, and he never changes it.